Hi there, I'm Delaney. At the launch of my own company. The one I built from scratch. My family handed flowers to my sister. She gave me that look. You know, the one like I'd shown up to someone else's celebration. Not mine. But that wasn't even the worst part. They cut my name from the speech, my own speech. And when she grabbed the mic to crack a joke about how some of us are just born for the spotlight, everyone laughed at me, and I stood there, clapping. Why do the people who know us best make us feel the smallest? If you've ever stayed quiet while someone else took your credit, this story is for you. Stick around, and don't forget to subscribe. Because the truth, it gets a lot worse before it gets better. I stood frozen for a moment. The kind of pause that looks like you're just soaking it all in. But really you're trying not to fall apart in front of an audience that doesn't even know they're applauding the wrong person. People kept clapping. Vienna grinned like she'd just won an award. My mother reached for her hand and squeezed it, like she'd just made her proud in front of 100 strangers. All I could do was smile. Or at least twist my mouth into something that resembled one. Wow, she's so natural up there. Someone whispered behind me. She could totally be on HGTV. Another voice chimed in a few seats over. Funny, HGTV didn't see the late nights I spent choosing sustainable finishes. The extra hours sanding reclaimed flooring. Or the mornings I stood in that space before it had windows or even heat. Vienna had stepped in front of the lights for less than 5 minutes. And somehow walked away with the credit for the sun. I clapped too. Because what else do you do when you're the founder of a company and your name hasn't even been mentioned? As people stood up for a round of applause, I carefully slipped back toward the side of the room. Near the refreshment table, someone had arranged cucumber mint water and fig crostinis. I had made sure to use all local vendors. No one asked. No one noticed. Vienna made a show of waving to the crowd before she descended the stage. Her heels clicking across the polished concrete like she was born to walk on runways made from my blood, sweat, and sawdust. Oh my God, Lainey, she called out with that high-pitched, performative sweetness she reserved for times when there were too many cameras around for her to be cruel. Wasn't that such a moment? She said, sweeping her hair behind one ear. You built the perfect stage. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe it was the way she said, stage. Like this whole thing was hers to star in. And I was just the crew who forgot to clear out of the shot. It was something, I said, reaching for a glass of water. My voice sounded calm, too calm. She leaned in, her perfume a cloud of citrus and something sharper. Hey, don't look so serious. Everyone loved it. You know, I only grabbed the mic because they skipped your speech. Thought I'd fill the silence. I stared at her. You knew they cut it. She shrugged. Well, I saw the new program. But I figured you'd be okay with it. You're not exactly the public speaking type, right? I opened my mouth, then shut it. My jaw clenched before I even realized it. I wanted to say, you're not the founder. Vienna, you didn't do this. You didn't build this room from nothing. But the words stayed stuck. Held hostage by years of family dinners where speaking up always meant starting a fire. And then being told I lit it on purpose. Vienna's smile didn't budge. Anyway, she said, sipping her drink, we make a great team. You build things. I bring them to life. Asterisk. It wasn't a compliment. It was a claim. And I had no idea how many people in that room had just started believing it. The event began winding down an hour later. People snapped photos near the ivy-covered arch I designed from reclaimed barnwood. Vienna was in most of them. I hovered near the back, shaking hands with clients who complimented the energy of the launch. As if good energy could be picked up at the florist. By the time the last guest left, it was well past 9. The natural lighting I'd obsessed over all week had long faded into the soft glow of the Edison bulbs strung above the entrance. I stood in the very room I had drawn on graph paper 2 years ago, when I couldn't afford a contractor and did the demo work myself. Now the air felt different. Like maybe I hadn't built a space. Maybe I just built a spotlight. And forgot to mark my name on it. I glanced at the empty bouquet stand where Vienna's flowers had rested earlier. The vase was gone. So was she. So was my speech. My name. My story. I stayed behind to help clean. Even though the staff offered. It felt like the only thing that was still mine. And when the lights finally dimmed and the last person had locked the front door behind them, I stood alone in the room I built. Clapping just like everyone else. Only this time, I wasn't sure who I was clapping for. As people filtered out of the studio, their voices faded into the night, replaced by the distant hum of cars and the clink of glassware being cleared. I stayed a little longer. Just to breathe, just to make sure the lights were off. just to exist in the room I built before it belonged to everyone else. By the time I got to my parents' house, the kitchen smelled like rosemary and something roasted. My mom had made her usual post-event comfort spread, as if a home-cooked dinner could wrap a neat bow around anything. Vienna was already there, perched on one of the bar stools, swirling a glass of wine like a contestant on *The Bachelor. She looked up when I walked in. All smiles. There she is, our little architect of ambiance, she said, raising her glass toward me. What a night. I forced a nod. Yeah, it was something. Mom emerged from the dining room with a serving tray. Delaney, sweetheart, that room had such amazing energy. I think Vienna brought the house down. Didn't she? I blinked, unsure if I misheard her. Vienna brought the house down. She really just lit up the room, Mom added, placing the tray on the table. I think people loved how she kept things moving. I sat down without responding, pulling my coat tighter even though the room was warm. My father, as usual, stayed quiet. He spooned mashed potatoes onto his plate like he'd been assigned a task and was committed to finishing it quietly. When Mom raised her glass, she smiled too wide. To my girls, both of them, but especially Vienna, for her stage presence, just like her high school days. Remember? Vienna giggled and tapped her glass against Mom's. I reached for my water instead. Dinner dragged on like it always did. When the air got heavy, I tried bringing up the flooring design, the walnut reclaimed planks I sourced locally and refinished myself. But I barely got 3 words out before Vienna cut in with a story about how someone once mistook her for a professional event host. They asked if I'd done this kind of thing before. Can you believe that? She said, laughing. I mean, maybe I missed my calling. Maybe you should open a studio, I said quietly, too quiet for anyone to hear over the clatter of silverware and compliments. After dessert, she disappeared into the hallway and came back with a wrapped box in her hand. She handed it to me with a dramatic bow, as if she were presenting me with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Just a little something, she said, smirking. The paper was shiny gold. The bow was curled just enough to suggest she'd taken time, or at least told someone else to. I peeled it back slowly. Inside was a sleek black leather notebook. Embossed in silver on the cover were the words, "How to Speak Like a Star, Tips from Vienna." Laughter exploded around the room. Mom covered her mouth like she was surprised, but I could tell she wasn't. My father chuckled under his breath. Vienna watched me closely, waiting. I let out a soft laugh, just enough to make it look like I got the joke. But inside, something shifted, not cracked, not broken, just moved. That's really thoughtful, I said, placing the notebook down beside my plate. Vienna leaned in, her voice low, syrupy. Seriously though, don't take it personally. You know, this world eats quiet girls alive. I looked at her and didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was learning which ones weren't worth giving away. I'm going to freshen up, I muttered, rising from the table. The hallway was dim, lit only by the sconces near the guest bathroom. I shut the door behind me and turned on the tap. The mirror caught me off guard. I looked fine, like someone who had everything under control. But my eyes didn't believe it. I stared at myself for a while. Not judging, not criticizing, just searching, trying to find the version of me who would have stood up and said, "That's enough." She wasn't in the mirror yet, but I knew she was coming. I returned to the table slowly, careful not to let the weight behind my eyes spill over in front of everyone. My seat was still warm, my untouched fork resting beside the half-eaten dinner. I no longer had an appetite. The moment I sat down, I heard my mother say, "Didn't Vienna just deliver that line perfectly? You've always had such a gift. Sweetie, you remember that time you won that middle school debate? Oh, you had the whole auditorium on their feet." Vienna laughed, flipping her hair. "Oh, that was the one where I argued that vending machines should be banned from schools. People said I could run for office after that." I forced a small laugh, then cleared my throat. "Actually, the flooring at the launch? Remember the lightwood under the arch? That was repurposed from an old wine cellar upstate. Took me forever to refinish it without chemical sealants." No one looked up. "Oh, and then she had that floral scarf on," Mom continued, barely skipping a beat. "It gave her such a lovely pop of color. So expressive. That's what audiences connect with." Vienna raised her glass. "Some people just naturally know how to hold a room." My father nodded vaguely, chewing without engaging. I went quiet again. It felt like trying to swim upstream with no water left in the river. They didn't even notice when I reached for the wine and poured myself half a glass. Not to drink, just to have something to do with my hands. The clatter of forks, The rise and fall of Vienna's voice, telling another exaggerated story about someone mistaking her for a publicist, filled the room like static. I stared at the edge of the napkin in my lap and folded it again and again. Something inside me ached, not from this moment alone, but from 100 like it that had come before. My mind drifted back to high school. Senior year, Vienna had been cast as the lead in her school play, a version of Pygmalion reset in the 1970s for some reason that still didn't make sense. The set was supposed to be minimal, but our drama teacher had a last-minute vision involving stained glass backdrops and a suspended swing. Guess who built it? I spent 3 weekends painting faux tiles and reinforcing the rigging for that ridiculous swing. Opening night came. Vienna shone. Her name was on the program. Her face was in the paper. The set? Well, no one clapped for the walls. After the show, she got flowers and a standing ovation. I got a pat on the back from the janitor who helped me sweep up confetti after curtain call. Back in the present, Vienna laughed at something Mom had said about a distant cousin who once dated a guy from a reality show. My eyes lingered on her smile. Practiced, confident, always facing the best light. And suddenly, the launch event didn't feel like an isolated hurt anymore. It was just another entry in a very old story. One I hadn't written, but had been cast in since I was a kid. Always backstage, always silent, always the one people thanked privately, if they remembered to at all. I thought about how many moments I had swallowed like medicine, convincing myself they weren't that bad. About how often I stood beside her while she held the trophy. The bouquet, the credit, and maybe the worst part wasn't her. It was me, because I kept showing up, hoping for something different, hoping to be seen, but even hope has a shelf life. And mine was starting to spoil. The drive home was quiet. But my mind wasn't. Every turn of the wheel came with another flash from dinner, Mom's voice echoing Vienna's praises. Vienna's eyes gleaming as if she knew she'd won something no one else even knew they were competing for. I didn't turn on music. I didn't need more noise. The city was unusually still that night. As I pulled into my street, porch lights blinked softly in the distance, and a cat darted across the sidewalk like it was running from something I couldn't name. I parked, sat for a few extra seconds in the car, then finally stepped out. The air smelled like wet pavement in early spring, a scent I used to love. By the time I got into bed, it was nearly midnight. I scrolled through old project notes, looking for something, maybe validation, maybe distraction, but found neither. So I turned off the screen and let the dark do the talking. I must have fallen asleep around 2. Because when my phone buzzed at 7 a.m., my eyes were still heavy. I reached for it blindly. Google alert, Vienna Shale. Inspire Sisters Company launch. I blinked, sat up, read it again. The headline stung, but not as much as the subtext. Vienna Shale, a charismatic speaker and known creative presence in Portland's design circle, inspired her sister's recent business venture, a promising new studio rooted in sustainability and modern aesthetic. There it was. My name barely, my work reduced, my story revised. The rest of the article read like a fluff piece, written by someone who'd attended the launch through filtered photos and secondhand quotes. The only quote attributed to me was generic. We hope to create spaces that feel both grounded and inspiring. I'd said that weeks ago in an email to a potential sponsor. It wasn't even from the event. But Vienna? She had 2 full paragraphs dedicated to her natural stage presence and her supportive role as a creative sister who brings energy wherever she goes. I set the phone down. But the words stayed, like stains on fabric you didn't catch in time. Later that morning, while waiting for my coffee to brew, I opened Facebook out of habit, not curiosity, and right there at the top of my feed was Mom's post, so proud of my girls. Especially Vienna, what a speaker. There was a link to the article. 3 hearts, 2 fire emojis, 1 comment from Aunt Sheila, she should totally go into PR. No one mentioned me, not even in the thread. I hovered over the comment box. Typed. Actually, I'm the founder. Vienna was a guest. Then erased it. Typed again. The company's mine. Always has been. Erased that too. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the app. I set my mug down without drinking. I didn't feel like swallowing anything that morning. Not words. Not bitterness. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and opened an old folder. Photos of the space when I first walked into it, cracked walls. Exposed brick. Dust thick enough to leave footprints. And then sketches. Paint swatches. A list of vendors I'd cold called. Trying to negotiate better prices with nothing but hope and mock-ups. That was the real story. Not Vienna's impromptu mic grab or Mom's glowing post. Mine. Still, I couldn't bring myself to post any of it. Not yet. I closed the folder and opened another, social media drafts I'd never published. Quotes about creative independence, photos of my process, notes on setbacks I'd never shared. Scrolling through them, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Every caption, every carefully staged photo, each one had been written with someone else's reaction in mind. I'd been waiting for applause I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. I clicked off everything, let the screen fade to black. Then I sat back and whispered to no one but the room. Asterisk, what if I just stop? Asterisk. Not in defeat, not because they wore me down, but because maybe it was time to stop performing in a story that had never let me speak. Maybe silence, for once, could be mine to own. 3 days, that's how long I stayed quiet. No posts, no replies, no likes. I removed myself from the family group chat without announcement. Just tapped, leave conversation, and closed the app. The little bubble on the corner of my screen stayed still. No one noticed. Or if they did, no one said anything. I didn't do it to be dramatic. I just wanted to see what silence felt like when I chose it for myself. During those 3 days, I buried myself in work. Real work, client proposals, a lighting layout for a yoga studio in Alberta Arts District, sanding a reclaimed oak bench in the back of my workshop. The kind of quiet that builds, not erases. On the 4th afternoon, I was reviewing paint samples at my drafting table when I heard the bell above the studio door chime. I looked up, expecting a delivery. Instead, my mother walked in like she owned the place. She didn't call, didn't text, just showed up. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, breezing past the display table and toward the workbench. I figured I'd stop by since I was in the neighborhood. She never just happened to be in my neighborhood. Her eyes darted around, scanning the room like she was judging a staged home. "Wow, this looks great. Really professional. I always said you had an eye." I nodded politely. "Thanks." She picked up a sample tile and turned it over in her hand. "You know, if you let Vienna handle your press, you'd be viral by now. She has a knack for getting people to notice things. You too could be a real brand." There it was again, that twist of the knife. Soft, smiling, and completely blind to its own blade. "I'm doing fine on my own," I said, turning back to my plans. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it," she said quickly, walking around to the front of my desk. "I just think, well, it could be nice to make it more of a family thing. You know, she could even invest. You two are stronger together." "No," I said, calm, sharp, final. Mom froze for a split second, then recovered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, I just thought it might be worth considering." Then, like she hadn't just implied my business needed saving, she pulled out her phone. "Have you seen the video Jake made from the launch? He edited it down so nicely. Really captures the energy of the night." I hesitated, then leaned over slightly to glance at the screen. Vienna, front and center again, speaking, gesturing, flashing that crowd-pleaser smile. There were panning shots of the studio, my studio, but I wasn't in them. Not really. A blurred shoulder here, a hand passing a glass of wine there. I looked like a background extra at my own premiere. My mother's face lit up as she watched it. "Doesn't she just glow on camera?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence between us was saying plenty. When the video ended, she looked up, waiting for a reaction. I met her eyes. "Steady. If you can't see what I've built without someone else's reflection on it. Maybe you were never really looking." Asterisk. Her mouth opened, then closed. Something flickered across her expression, confusion. Maybe. Or, it was hard to tell. She tucked her phone back into her purse and gave me a short nod. "Well, I should get going," she said, brushing non-existent lint from her sleeve. I didn't walk her out. The door shut behind her with a soft click. But it sounded like a line snapping. I stood still for a moment. My palms flat on the work table. My breath slow and even. That had been the first time I said no without cushioning it. Without explaining or apologizing. And the world didn't end. She left. And I stayed. Not invisible. Not erased. Just here. Exactly where I belonged. I didn't go to Sunday dinner. I didn't text with some flimsy excuse or promise to drop by later. I just didn't go. Around 6:14 p.m. Vienna's name popped up on my screen. "Hope your little studio is still standing." No emoji. No follow-up. Just sarcasm laced with that familiar need to provoke. I let the message sit there. Unread but fully absorbed. It didn't deserve a response. I spent that evening organizing client files, labeling samples, and steaming wrinkles from a set of linen drapes for a space I'd be presenting Tuesday. No candles, no music, just focus. I needed the kind of work that reminded me I existed outside their narrative. The next morning, just before I stepped into the studio, my phone buzzed again, this time from Sam, a fellow designer and longtime friend. Have you seen what your mom posted? Girl? Deep breath. I clicked the link with a sigh already forming. It was the launch video. Reposted from Jake's Final Cut. The caption from Mom read, "What a star my Vienna is." Couldn't be prouder of her impact on this new creative journey. I watched it on mute. Even that was too loud. Vienna opened the clip, delivering her unscripted little monologue. Then came a montage of her laughing with guests, handing someone a glass of champagne, gesturing as if giving a tour. The lighting made her glow. The cuts were tight, seamless, like a trailer for a show she'd already starred in 10 episodes of. I waited to see myself just once. But I never came. Even the B-roll footage of my studio, the reclaimed arch, the textured wall I had hand-sanded myself, was narrated by her voice. And when the camera finally landed on someone with dark hair and a blazer in the corner of the frame, it wasn't me. It was stock footage. I stared at the screen. Not moving, not breathing. Then slowly, I clicked share. I typed one sentence above the video and hit post before I could overthink it. Asterisk. Just a reminder that I built this room. Every inch, every hour, every credit, asterisk. That was all. Within an hour, quiet support trickled in. 2 former clients liked it. A professor from my design program commented. Never doubted whose vision it was. A few colleagues sent private messages. Short, simple acknowledgements like, saw it, and good on you. From my family? Nothing. No call, no text, not even an awkward, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle it. But that silence? It didn't sting the same way anymore. It felt expected, and freeing. Later that evening, Vienna texted again. If you want help with your next speech, I could ghost write it for you. That emoji landed like a slap dressed in lipstick. I didn't reply. I didn't even roll my eyes. I just tapped archive and moved on. Instead of getting pulled back into her orbit, I booked a spot to speak at a local creative conference. It wasn't huge, just a modest gathering of independent designers, sustainability advocates, and young entrepreneurs. No big stage, no family invite list, just me, my voice, and the space I made. I stared at the blank space on the registration form where it asked for an optional tagline beneath your name. I typed, asterisk, quiet doesn't mean absent, asterisk, and hit submit. That night, I walked into my apartment, unzipped my boots, and stood by the window for a long while. Burnout doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like silence mistaken for weakness. Like being edited out of your own story. Like staying too long where you're only seen in relation to someone else. But now I was done shrinking to fit the frame they made. And this time, I wouldn't be asking for room. I'd be taking it, asterisk. Dash dash dash. I arrived at the venue early. Earlier than needed even for setup. The space was smaller than the launch. More intimate. A converted warehouse with exposed beams and concrete floors. Scattered with folding chairs and DIY paper lanterns strung overhead. No velvet ropes. No rented sound stages. No choreographed introductions. Just names on a printed agenda and a mic taped to a recycled wooden crate they were calling a podium. It was quiet when I stepped inside. The kind of quiet I used to think meant something was missing. Now it felt like possibility. I laid out my samples, angled the small lamp toward the fabric swatches, and reviewed my notes, though I already knew what I wanted to say. This time, I wasn't rehearsing to win anyone over. I wasn't pitching. I was finally speaking for myself. People began to trickle in around 10, young designers, local business owners, 2 architecture students from Reed College who looked both inspired and terrified. No one wore designer dresses. No one carried fresh-cut flowers. But the room filled anyway. When my name was called, I didn't hesitate. I walked to the front, adjusted the mic with a steady hand, and looked at the faces before me. I told them about the room I built. Not the launch, not the audience that never clapped, but the actual room, the materials I chose because they deserved a second life. The hours I spent in silence sanding and staining because no one else saw what I did when I looked at unfinished wood. I spoke about the beauty of slow design, of quiet spaces that don't beg for attention but earn it. And then I said something I hadn't planned to. I used to think the loudest voice in the room deserved the credit. But I've learned that sometimes, the loudest voice is just the one that gets the most airtime. Not the one that did the work, asterisk. The audience was still listening. I wasn't rushing or searching for words. I let the silence sit between sentences. Like punctuation. When I finished, no one clapped at first. They stood. Then they clapped. A woman with silver hair and tortoiseshell glasses came up afterward and shook my hand. I never knew you were the actual founder. Thank you for saying what most of us are afraid to admit. As people filtered out, some paused at my table to ask questions. Take a card. Compliment the samples. It wasn't a frenzy. It was sincere. I stayed an extra half hour. Packing up, not because I had to, but because I wanted to savor the moment while it was still mine. That evening, back at home, I made tea and sat on the couch in my oversized hoodie. Scrolling through photos a friend had sent from the event. I chose one, just me. Mid-sentence, the warm light catching the curve of my smile. I posted it with a caption, asterisk, creating is louder than performing, asterisk. Within minutes, people began liking and sharing. A few reshared the quote. One message came from a client I hadn't spoken to in over a year. This made me want to rebuild my kitchen and my confidence. You're the real deal. It felt good. Not loud, not flashy, just true. Then Vienna's name appeared on my screen. Heard you had a nice little TED Talk moment. Don't let it go to your head. I stared at the message. She couldn't help herself. Even now, when I hadn't involved her. When she wasn't even in the room. She needed to inject herself into the narrative. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot and archived the conversation. By the next day, I noticed something interesting. One of Vienna's old college friends commented on my post. Wait. I thought Vienna was the founder? Someone else replied, no. She just talks like she is. The thread kept growing. Some defended her, but others began questioning what they'd been told. What she'd let them assume. And for once, I didn't feel the need to clarify or correct. Let them ask. Let them figure it out. I wasn't hiding anymore. That week I updated the website. I added a new section, behind the design. It featured process shots, client stories, and a full video tour of the studio, my voice narrating. My hands in the work. The only face was mine. The site traffic doubled. 3 new inquiries came in. One from a boutique hotel. One from a university campus. One from a mother who simply wrote, I want my daughter to learn from someone like you. Meanwhile, Vienna posted a photo of herself holding a bouquet with the caption, Building Magic with My Sister. Like always, but this time the comments weren't what she expected. Didn't Delaney do the design? Wait, who's the founder again? You sure talk a lot for someone who didn't even mention her in your speech. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for once, people were finally listening to the right voice. It started with a ping. I was pouring coffee into my travel mug. Already mentally lining up the tasks for the day. Follow-up emails. A lighting proposal. Maybe a walk through the furniture yard. When the message came through, I glanced at my phone screen, expecting another marketing email or appointment reminder. But it wasn't that. We'd love to discuss your partnership with Vienna. Please send over her deck by Friday. Excited to move forward with both of you. Cameron, lead investor. I froze, one hand still on the mug handle. The steam rising from the cup felt suddenly irrelevant. I read the message again. Slower this time. Partnership with Vienna. Her deck. I hadn't authorized any pitch involving her. I hadn't even mentioned her name in months. Not in anything official. Certainly not to investors. My pulse quickened. Not with panic, but with something colder. Controlled. Clear. I opened my browser and searched for Vienna's recent press appearances. Something I rarely did unless prompted. This time I was looking for something specific. It didn't take long to find. 2 articles. 1 video podcast. In both, Vienna introduced herself as a driving force behind her sister's company. Then pivoted to phrases like collaborative creative direction and strategic visibility. She never said the word co-founder. But she didn't need to. The framing said it for her. My words, my studio, even my personal photo from launch day. Edited, branded, and tied neatly with her logo. In one clip, she sat on a velvet couch, explaining how she helped give the business its identity. My mouth went dry. My coffee sat untouched on the counter. This wasn't just her soaking in the attention anymore. She was actively rewriting the script and submitting it to publishers. The rest of that morning was a blur of tabs and screenshots. I pulled up my LLC filing from 2019. The original name, reservation email. My pitch deck. My first business plan. Photos of me standing ankle deep in plaster dust with a paint roller in one hand and a blueprint in the other. Voice notes I recorded at 3 a.m. while brainstorming marketing angles. Invoices. Purchase orders. Rejected loans. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I assembled the truth, like blueprints for a house I had already built. But no one had ever stepped inside to see for themselves. By noon, I had crafted a post. Asterisk. Let's clarify something. I started this company 4 years ago. I own 100% of it. I designed every corner, pitched every client, and poured my name into the foundation. Vienna was a guest at my launch, not a partner in its creation. Please stop mistaking visibility for ownership. Asterisk. Attached were 8 images, my filings, my process, and 2 behind-the-scenes photos from the launch that never made it to the final video. I tagged Cameron. I tagged the local design magazine that had interviewed Vienna. And yes, I tagged her too. Then I hit post. It took 38 minutes. That's how long it took for Vienna to text. You didn't have to go that far. I stared at her words for a second. I considered replying with a list. Every time she took credit. Every time she let our mother erase me. Every moment she smiled while the world applauded for what I'd built. But I didn't need a list. Instead, I typed. Asterisk. I gave you a stage. You tried to take the company. This was me reclaiming both. Asterisk. No emoji. No sign off. After I sent it, I turned my phone face down. The comments flooded in. Some were shocked. Wait. She's not even on the team? Others angry. So tired of people riding coattails and calling it collaboration. A few defended her. She didn't say she was co-founder. But the damage was already done. The story had split. And this time, I wasn't the one buried in the subtext. By early evening, the investor emailed back. Apologetic. I'm grateful for your transparency. Delaney, we'll be updating our notes accordingly. The design magazine issued a quiet correction. Vienna's podcast episode disappeared from its platform. And Vienna? She posted a vague story about family misunderstandings and navigating the blurry lines between inspiration and ownership. But the comments said more than she did. Sounds like someone finally said what needed to be said. Why didn't you just credit her from the start? Funny how the quiet sister knew how to speak up just fine when it counted. That night I sat on the floor of my living room, with a blanket around my shoulders, a candle flickering beside me, and no one else in the room. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't regretting. I was reclaiming something I never should have had to fight for in the first place. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was honest. And it was mine. The days passed without much noise. No new posts from Vienna. No frantic calls from Maris. Just space. Stillness. A vacuum where their voices used to be. And in the quiet, I could finally hear mine. Clive, our father, sent an email 2 mornings after the post went viral. The subject line read, "You were right to speak." Just 7 words. Followed, "I'm proud of you. Always have been." I read it twice, saved it in a folder marked, "Keep," and never replied. The ripple effect of truth had finally reached the surface. The local design magazine that once printed Vienna's name beneath a title she hadn't earned retracted the article quietly, of course. No public announcement, just an update on the website and a note of correction at the bottom. The investor who had reached out about the partnership with Vienna sent a formal apology. I didn't need a refund or a rewrite, just recognition, and I got it. Meanwhile, Vienna's curated brand began to fray. The podcast episode she recorded vanished from the hosting platform, replaced with a vague placeholder. This episode has been removed by request. Her social media followers plateaued, then slowly began to dip. Every post she shared was now met with comments like, "Where's Delaney in this? So are you the founder or just photogenic?" Eventually, Vienna posted something that looked like an apology, a photo of us from years ago, smiling in a blurry crowd at some street festival. The caption read, "Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones we understand the least." Working on that, it wasn't accountability, it was damage control. But this time, no one clapped. I didn't respond. I didn't like it, didn't message, didn't even screenshot. I let it pass like a wind I no longer needed to brace against. Instead, I poured myself into planning something that had been on the back burner for far too long, our first client appreciation night at the studio. No press, no event planners, no Vienna, just food, soft lighting, music, and the people who trusted me before the headlines. The night of the event, I arrived an hour early to sweep the floor, adjust the sconces, and double-check the seating around the reclaimed oak island I'd refinished by hand. The same island Vienna once leaned across like it was part of her set. Now it was mine, fully, unapologetically. People came, some brought flowers, others brought questions about projects. A few brought gratitude. We laughed, We remembered design quirks. I even gave an impromptu tour to a new couple looking to build a nursery for twins arriving in spring. There were no stage lights, no dramatic speeches, just conversation, eye contact, mutual respect. And when I walked outside at the end of the evening to lock up, I looked back through the studio windows and saw my name etched into the glass, Shale Studio. Founded by Delaney Shale. It was small, barely visible from the street. But I didn't need it to shout. I just needed it to stay. Asterisk. Dash dash dash. Later that week, as I was clearing out old email folders, I came across the group thread with my mother and sister. I didn't read it. I didn't delete it either. I archived it. I didn't block Vienna. I didn't reach out to Maris. There was nothing left to salvage or sever. Just distance. And in that distance, clarity. I opened Instagram one last time. Not to scroll, but to unfollow Vienna, Maris, even a few family friends who had always cheered a little too loudly when I stayed small. With each tap, something lifted. A weight I didn't even realize I'd been trained to carry. That evening, I brewed a cup of ginger tea, turned off my phone, and stood in the middle of the studio with all the lights dimmed. Except the pendant above the center bench. The room felt like breath, warm, full, steady. I ran my hand across the tabletop, tracing the grain lines with my fingertips. This was mine. The design, the process, the healing, the silence I chose, the voice I reclaimed, and I didn't need applause to know that was enough. I walked toward the back, turned off the final light, and stood for a moment at the doorway. Not everyone cheers when you take up space. Not everyone stays when you stop making yourself small. But the truth? You don't need them to. Sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought in boardrooms or courtrooms, but across dinner tables, family chats, and quiet rooms where your name is left out. Delaney's story is a reminder. You don't need to be loud to be valid. And you don't need their applause to know you've built something real. Have you ever been the quiet one in the room? Doing the work, holding things together, but barely seen? What did it take for you to finally speak up? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. And if stories like this resonate with you, about reclaiming your voice, setting boundaries, and finding quiet strength, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow the channel. There's so much more to come. Let your voice matter, even if it shakes the room.